You announced you're not gonna adapt much more Shakespeare, so you're good with it, or you're through. You
The
got
life,
bored.
the life can bring you surprises. Yeah, life can surprise you. No, we're actually working with SYCORAX just to start. SYCORAX is a film that we made in order to find a common language between me and Lois and the people that made the movie in order to make another film that is aerial, that is the film, the feature project that we had for many years now with Lois. And so SYCORAX is a preparation for that. No, in order to make a film, we'll make another film. And in order to test grounds, no, we can have many, we can get along very well, we can have ideas in common, but then being in a shooting is a different thing. Finding the like that the interest and the joy of making a film together somehow comes from making it. So as making a feature that somehow the production and so on like is quite an adventure. Let's try it first in a smaller scale, taking some elements from the play that is very rich, you know, a play such as Tempest. So SYCORAX is definitely not my last Shakespeare riff in a way, or how would you say, profanation more than adaptation. And yeah.
But, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what brought you together. So was it the text itself, like your fascination for the text, or Lois, was it that you had seen Matías's films on Shakespeare and then you proposed let's do one together, or maybe you can go a little bit into that, and also which role like the myths or the writings play in your collaboration. Are you discussing the texts? Are you considering how to change it, to adapt it? Yeah.
Yeah, the project started many years ago. Matías won an award in Bafisi that makes the opportunity to make a film in collaboration with someone. And I was lucky, he chose me to make it. And we started to work, no? And Matías, since the beginning, his proposal was to work around the Tempest, because he saw in that play a really nice mix between theater and nature, and know that there were like and the word and the silence of the nature, no, also, and well, some different elements that our identity as filmmakers before this film were in many levels like very distant or very opposite, no? And I was more into the contemplation, into the duration of the image, into the painting, and Matías was his films were more talkative, more movement in the camera and the actors. So it was, I think it was interesting, this selection of me, but the goal, I think, for both of us was to try to grow up as filmmakers, no? Go into a place where you didn't explore so much. You can grow up in that direction as a filmmaker, no? Having more tasks, and then yeah, so we get into SYCORAX with this idea, no? As I think at the beginning, well, the first read of the Tempest was to try to keep, you know, to extract the ideas, the elements that we like it the most. And for me, the character of Ariel, that is the one that we are going to work in the future film, was very important, no? As is the spirit of the island, no? And later in SYCORAX, we decided to work in the short film about this character because it's a character that is like a prologue of the play, no? It's a character that they talk about her, but she doesn't appear in present time in the play, no? So they were more or less the ideas.
Yeah. It was a detour from the beginning. It was already a detour to refer to SYCORAX and to leave somehow the play untouched for the future feature that would come. And then because we were actually interested in SYCORAX, I think that it's one of the most interesting characters, and the paradox that it doesn't have a body or a voice in the play is somehow something that it's inviting you to do something.
Yeah, it's very fascinating that in your film you're highlighting a character which is not put to the center of the narrative in the original writing, and maybe also to include the second film right away. Lilith, I'm very curious, of course, about your decision together with Khan to change. Like you made a different decision, right? You didn't put a character from the margin into the center, but you took the central character of your story, like the Orpheus, and you changed it, or you changed the gender of the character. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about that process and how you shaped that being? Yes.
I think if you read those very, very, very old materials like Orpheus, those figures or characters, they are kind of symbols for very big human conflicts or subjects. And I think those what they carry is kind of it doesn't depend on their sexes. It's kind of universal. So I never really ask myself, can I do it as a woman? Because I think it's an equal thing, those conflicts. Or but I think my director, he once mentioned that the male version of Orpheus, he failed for so long because he brings his beloved only halfway out of the underworld. And I think he wanted to see what will happen if he turns it into a female version. What would a woman do? Yes.
Yes. In the film, there are also many very interesting choices. I think, like in some scenes you sing in Russian. There's a lot of like methods of moving away from only the text, but you're like expanding this whole universe into of course, a film form. And you're singing constantly, or almost constantly.
Yes, yeah. I think the whole myth of Orpheus it's a story about the magical power of music. And I mean, every one of us, I think, experienced that, for instance, singing together or listening to music together has a very a connecting power, a very kind of magical power, maybe. And Orpheus was the first person who stood up in front of an audience and would sing about his emotions. I think Adorno once said, "Alle Oper ist Orpheus." He's the beginning of opera. Yes, I think about the music. Someone said that the hell has 9 entrances, and Carvin mentioned a poet who would say Manila is one of the gates to hell. And that's why Kevin composed those 9 songs from hell. And yes, I had to sing them. And he wanted, I think he likes to drag people out of their comfort zones, or he likes if people do the unexpected. And that's why he wanted me to sing in several languages. Yes.
Diedrich, how about you? Do you agree with Lilith's description as music a magical thing which brings us together, and how does that relate to the myths we have just seen?
Yeah, I like the songs a lot, and also the way they were performed. And I think
Ich glaube, dein Mikro ist aus, ja.
I like the songs a lot, and also the way they were performed. But I don't know if I agree with the universality of the myth, because I think I was always very convinced by the description of the interpretation of the Orpheus Eurydice myth by Klaus Teweleit, who for him it's like the central myth of male creativity. Basically, men need dead women in order to be creative, and so it's a certain form. It's a certain form of male production in a patriarchal society. Is this kind of trying to save the dead woman, but not really being able to save her. No? So it's interesting if you turn it around, and it becomes I think it's a totally different thing. For certain periods, I didn't even think of the original story anymore, although it was always present. I really liked the idea of the several definitions of hell in the very beginning. I think by doing that, the whole film kind of got rid of the problems that it would have as being about such an important, well-known myth, by like going through all the kind of historical definitions of hell. Hell are the others, and hell is this, and hell is that. And then, okay, if hell is all these things, and then it's kind of, it liberates the search for someone who's trapped in hell, or who's, which leads us basically to the commonalities between the two films, that in both films, someone is trapped somewhere, or someone is kept prisoner, or whatever. And both films are multilingual. I mean, the SYCORAX also is constantly switching between Portuguese and Spanish. And I was wondering, both films, if there is like, if this is kind of if this is the festival mode of those films, or if there are some future versions for some, I don't know, TV station in which they have like continuous English subtitles, something like that. Or they already had at one point, but or if one can do something with the multilinguality, because I was not able to identify all languages in your film, but I was able to identify the distinction between Portuguese and Spanish, which was very interesting for this kind of idea that there is some kind of uninhabited island, and there are these two languages spoken. And of course, The Tempest is the story of colonialism, and the uninhabited island is the central myth of colonialism, that there are islands that are uninhabited and people can go there and colonize them. And so this is like this I really liked about the SYCORAX movie. The other thing about the uninhabited island, that if you go to just any place in the world and you go to the central market and you hold your camera and look for certain people and you call, yeah, this is Prospero, and this is Antonio, and this is Sebastian, and so on, then you kind of define the singularity of the characters who are now something special, who are now portrayed by artists. That I thought also was kind of interesting, although it was also kind of problematic to, they're just Prospero, that's just Antonio, this is just like, they're just regular human beings, we don't need to worry about them. Now I'm lost in my argument.
Let me help you. By the way, also in case you would like to support us, there's a mic around. You can participate anytime in the conversation. Let's get a bit deeper into that idea of misunderstanding what it is, because you've been talking now about language so much, and at least to me, like, this concept of understanding is very much connected to language, and cinema is of course also more than language. So I'd like to, maybe we can try and connect a little bit this idea of understanding a myth or understanding the world with the two films. And this goes to all of you, I would say, like, are these films we have seen which are trying to understand something, or which are trying to help us see more clearly the narratives they are based on?
I think what happens in the SYCORAX movie is pretty interesting to me, because they, as I understand that, they took a speechless or voiceless character from that Shakespeare piece, and they give give her a voice or several voices. And I experienced that when it comes to very, very, very big emotions, then I think we become voiceless too. So we don't have words anymore to describe them. They remain silent. Yeah. Okay.
Take your time. In the meantime, maybe our Zoom guests would like to comment, and maybe also on your choice to use non-professional actresses, as far as I can decipher it. Maybe you can talk a bit about the choice of individuals you included in the film to interpret the text.
Well, there's a mix of things, no? Like in life. You have on one side Agustina Muñoz, that she's an actress and director and an essayist, and on the other side you have Diana and Susana that were part of that. It's SYCORAX and the wardrobe person that are part of the production, and they somehow became characters as we merge what we do with what we merge things. And then there was the people in the park in Riviera Grande that somehow serve as a starting point, like a moment to trigger the possibility of anyone being one of these characters, anyone being a noble, like, or this person in particular to become a noble or a drunk person or a sailor. And the idea of bringing in possibilities, was this fact of like merging people that would be more that would do theater and people that would not, whether it is a wardrobe person in the crew or a woman that just walks by into the park and faces the camera, and look at us. So also it's like the possibility of imagining different sorts of Mirandas, adding a new Miranda, the possibility of adding new faces to Miranda, for instance, not only like SYCORAX. Then we go specifically to SYCORAX because it's very focused, the research that it was like, this first attempt into seeing, and then of course all the women in the audition, that we shouldn't forget that sometimes it is funny to think that maybe the SYCORAX number 5 was better than the SYCORAX that the movie chooses. Maybe we should have made the film with the other women as well. But it was a matter of like, seeing different voices, the differences between people that would be near in that sense, and listening to that. A crossroad, something that is composed, the text that we chose, the collage of text that we chose, and what the space was giving us there, like a first encounter in a way. As again, I repeat, there is this idea of doing a feature.
You've been talking about this aspect of possibility, like you're showing us possibilities of which person could become a particular character. But this level of possibility, is it for you also part of the text itself, or is this something you see which is missing in the text and you want to like create through the film?
The thing is that the only thing that we know of SYCORAX is what Prospero says about her, Prospero and some other male characters, and it was the film is about colonialism, but we also, it was a book by Silvia Federici, was very important for us, and it's Caliban and the Witch, and she explains very clearly how witch hunting and colonialism were in parallel and with similar goals, to control the other and to keep the power, one against the woman and the other against the people that they were colonizing. And so what we did here is what Prospero says about SYCORAX is that she's old, bad, ugly, and all these things that usually says about a witch. So, but we didn't trust him so much, no? As the history tell us that they were lying so much about this woman, no? So is what we try to do, no? To try to see, okay, who can be, if we are not trusting him and we are not trusting this stereotype of the witch, who can be the SYCORAX, no? She can be sweet, she can be young, no? She can be many different things, and all of the woman of the casting could be SYCORAX or this idea of SYCORAX, no? And also the film works, and I think as the idea of myth is going around, the film works between the reality and the fiction, no? This first scene in the square where we are pointing the characters, we have the level of the reality and the level of someone projecting fiction over there, no? And the myth goes, no? The myth is somehow goes behind the reality or over the reality, no? They overimpose, no? And it's something that is in the reality somehow, no? I think.
Maybe we can talk about.
No, please.
Maybe we can talk about one of the scenes in SYCORAX, actually, which is in the center of the film, this casting scene when like several potential actresses are reciting the same lines. I'd be very curious to hear from you, Diedrich and Lilith, like how you perceive the scene, like how did it, yeah, I don't want to say more.
May I first answer your previous question?
Yeah, sure.
About the understanding of languages and so on, because I think since these two films are combined under the category myth, I think it's that they are referring to very different kind of original texts, and when Lilith was saying that, Adorno said that with Orfeo opera starts, or from Orfeo on everything will be an opera, or no, every opera will be Orfeo. And he's referring to Monteverdi's Orfeo probably, and that so that would be an original text, and in the case of but not really a text. I mean, it existed before, and in the case of The Tempest, it's kind of a complete articulated document. It exists, it can be read and interpreted, it has been translated into many languages, and it's a full text, and it can be, of course, it says everything. There's no secret meaning, it's all openly there, it just needs to be pointed at, and then it is. Whereas a myth can be two different things. Either it's in this reactionary idea of a myth, that the myth is kind of an eternal truth, something that has been true for all times. Then, Stadttheater directors start to interpret the myth once and again, again and again and again in a different way, but it's always true. The non-reactionary idea of a myth would be necessarily the myth, if it's really that old, can only has reached us as a fragment. It can never have reached us completely. So what we are doing is not interpreting it, we are completing it, or we are filling the gaps, which is a totally different thing than what we have to do with The Tempest. In The Tempest, we point at certain points, and in Orfeo, we are filling the gaps. And of course, others have done this before. So that's a text that we can refer to, like Monteverdi. But the original text came to us as incomplete, and I think that's two totally different tasks. So, and about the casting scene, at that point of the movie, I was still thinking, I wasn't sure where it would go to. And if that kind of Brechtian thing, what was going on there, would continue to be Brechtian, or it would go to a different direction. And I was in a way very happy that it did go to a different direction. And on the same time, I was kind of this mechanism of casting that is now so popularized through TV and everything, that you immediately start to feel for people who get casted, and you immediately have this kind of hope she does not fail, or this kind of emotion that was in a nice way misled. No? It was not meant to. I was not meant to have this emotion, but of course I could not help it.
Lilith, how do you feel about interpreting this text and filling the gaps? Is that something you can relate to what Diedrich just described? And maybe also in addition, I'm very curious, like what drew you to this film and this collaboration? Was it actually the text itself, or was it rather the exchange with Khan as a director?
About gaps, I can only say that often I think gaps are super important in movies, and often in what I see when I watch German films or TV, it's like everything is explained and showed, and yes, and I think most of the time it's very interesting, the things you cannot see or you cannot plan or you cannot count on, because then my own mind as an audience starts to work, my fantasy, and then it becomes a very personal experience to watch a film. So gaps, I think they are always very interesting. And if a material, as Diedrich said, already carries those gaps, it's a kind of a highly potential thing for movies, I think, because movies live from their secrets. And about the collaboration, I saw some of Cavan's movies before. I think I saw Ruined Heart at the Berlinale a couple of years ago, and I really fall in love with his language. And then it happened that we met each other and we would do that film. And it wasn't about the material. I wasn't so interested in of course I'm interested, but it wasn't about that I wanted to play Orphea. It just happened because he was planning to do that film with Alexander Kluge. And then it happened that I think they didn't plan to make a female version. It just happened I was there, and then it turned out to be a Orphea. What else?
Maybe we listen to Douglas, who was the writer on the film and would like to comment.
Yeah, so so in 2017, Cavan approached me and asked if I wanted to collaborate with him to make a film, a take on the Orpheus myth, based on the Bozzati rendition. I think it's called Poem Strip. And we wanted to transplant that to Metro Manila, to Mondo Manila, as he calls it, and see how some of the elements of the myth can be twisted in such a way that would be appropriate to Metro Manila. So yeah, that's the thing. Okay, I forgot what yeah, sorry.
But still, I think Diedrich, you said something else, but I think I started acting on theater, and I was really used to that you can just change the genders, because those old stories or pieces, they are always told in the same way, and it's very interesting to see what happens if you just change the sexes, because often it's those languages about thoughts and ideas and emotions, and for me it sometimes, of course the biology is always maybe the most interesting thing, but it's also interesting to just change it and see what happens.
You know, I wasn't trying to say that the biology is somehow not alterable. I was just saying that it has been used historically, this story as a cover up for a certain construction of male creativity. Not that this is kind of natural or ahistorical, just that rather historical and yeah.
Zizek, I read Zizek said, if you about relationship, if you cannot live without somebody, you cannot live with somebody. And I think this whole myth about, because of Orpheus, he loses her the moment he turns around, so he cannot not checking on her, and the moment he turns around, that's the moment he loses her. I thought it's a very interesting metaphor.
That is a metaphor about relationships that are based on desire, but there's this other part of the myth, which is that he's a singer, and he's such a great singer, and he's such a singer because he lost her, and that's the other part of the myth, and that part of the myth I think is rather problematic. It's basically it lives till rock and roll and beyond, continues to attract people. But I think this is a very that someone needs to be killed in order for someone else to be productive. That's kind of the other side of that myth.
I think what really interested me is what happens after he comes back out of the underworld, because he refuses to fall in love with any other women, but he's so beautiful and he adorable, and all the women they freak out because they want to seduce him and they cannot accept he is not desiring them, and then they like hundreds of women they start to tear him apart, and they cut off his head, but the head is still singing, and then they take a hammer and a needle and oh sorry my English, die nageln die Gitarre.
They make an instrument from his body.
They make an instrument, and the head is still singing, and then they throw the head into the sea, and the head is still singing until the head comes to Orpheus' father, which is Apollo. No, I'm not sure. I think it's Apollo. Yeah. And he finally makes him shut up. And the second he finally dies and shuts up, a young boy who takes care of animals starts to sing.
I mean, it's Ziggy Stardust, no? Without the part where they made an instrument out of his body, but even that, the way Ziggy Stardust was presented was Mick Ronson way of guitar playing. I think it's still a very valid story, very very often used.
I find this relation very fascinating, like making an instrument out of a human being, like as a metaphor for what actually the myths, like the history connected to these stories, like whether it's crushing those trying to adapt them, or whether they are maybe transformed through the myth. Like when you get in touch with it, you become like contaminated with the myths. And
but it's also the step from singing to instruments, from the unity of the cause of the sound and the cause of the emotion in one source, which is one person, to the externalized instrument that is used and that is used for producing emotions by people who know how to use it and who have the skills and so on, and it becomes like an instrument, and it's no longer the authentic singer no longer is the only source of it. It's now possible to subsume this under conditions of regular production of things, like other things. You have a tool now, an instrument.
I would like to talk for a second about the moment in which we see these films, the time in which we are living now, and whether we are in a time in which cinema is actually creating myths which haven't been there before, and how the films we have just seen, which are dealing with myths which have been there long before cinema, how they relate to it. Like we have Diedrich, you're a big fan of The Simpsons, for example. I'm really wondering, like, are there like other pop cultural phenomena or particular films which you would describe as creating something new, or is it all an adaptation of what has been there before? And is it maybe even the task for artists to create something new or change the old narratives?
Well, I mean, who in his right mind would want a myth? I mean, a myth is definitely not the way enlightened human beings should communicate with each other, and including in art. What we do, if we listen to or refer to or work through myths that already exist, it's like a necessary working through the elements of our culture that we live in. But to produce new myth means to produce myth in under current conditions would mean to avoid discussion, open communication. It would mean to disclose something without good reasons for that. I mean, there couldn't be good reasons for seduction or anything like that, but then they would be kind of contextualized by some kind of certain goals or something like that. And I think that if you mention The Simpsons or something, they like so many products of the American cultural industry of the last 20 years were deconstructing, if you wish, or feasting on already existing myths, but not producing new ones. Maybe only one new myth, which is like that you can deconstruct anything and everything, and that would be enough to get rid of it, which it isn't. Obviously, they do it again and again and again, and these things still exist. And so, I mean, there is of course something going on in re-mythologizing the world right now, which is kind of a mixture of I don't know, kind of misguided idea of rebellion and conspiracy theories and so on, that becomes more and more mythological, like conspiracies are contemporary myth, but I don't think that we need them, and I don't think that I've seen any good art that would produce any new myth.
There's a question in just a second. I would just like to read something because it fits very well. Tonight, one guest is not here with us, Anna Liliamiapur. She was the fourth chair. Well, she wasn't because she would have been on Zoom, but she has sent us a small letter inspired by SYCORAX. I'm just going to read it for a second. Guess all I can say to you now is, yes, it's a strange time, but perhaps stranger is how quickly we adapt in being determined to constantly define reality, something that is impossible to define, and how quickly our perspective is forced to accept a new normal. But if you can shift from one place to another, you can see that normal doesn't exist, never did. SYCORAX touched these thoughts for me and did in a very female-minded way. And then I just sit and wonder what the future will hold for us all. No one can guess. We just find ways to participate.
Yeah, I mean, normal does exist, not as a truth. Of not things are not normal, but there's always a normality that is kind of that we are forced, that is forced upon us. It's so it's that does exist. That's something we deal with and maybe should get rid of, but it's, yeah.
Okay, let's hear a question while we ponder on normality and.
Hi. So my
Hi.
question goes to the first film. I'd like to ask how you guys perceive the encounter of the bodies in the film. So maybe I could also call like a contrast of between these bodies. And yeah, and I don't know if you thought about also like what is the role that beauty plays in these myths, because we're talking about a white woman that would fit very easily in our myth of European beauty, for example. That in myths like all these other bodies, dark-skinned bodies, and I think also the photography. There is something that you can see that it's very differently, like how the film portrays these bodies. And yeah, I'm just curious. I'd like to hear a bit.
What I experienced is that because I was very, very unprepared when I fly to Manila and we shot the film. Kevin, he's not talking a lot, and there was just a very, very small script. I think it was about 9 pages, but I read it like poetry, and I could actually in each scene I just had question marks. How's that possible to film? So and then of course there's no rehearsal and no several takes and no talking. So I think Kevin kind of likes to push people just into something. And so I came to Manila, and on the first day we went into a music studio and we would record those 9 songs, which were the only thing I could kind of prepare. And the whole shoot, I thought we would use, of course, the recorded version of my singing. And while shooting, I was just singing the worst I could. But I always thought, yeah, sure, they will later use the recorded songs. And I was very curious when we had a premiere at the Tallinn Film Festival, and I was kind of in shock when I saw the film, because I thought, wow, he used mostly the original soundtrack. But sorry, what was interesting that Kevin shoots for 24 hours a day, because it's a thing about money, because he has so little money and so little time to pay people. So he just shot actually the whole script in 1 day. And this, which is not uninteresting, because for me filming is always a certain state of daydreaming or hallucinating, and shooting so insanely intense puts you in a very interesting state where you easily leave the areas of logic and fall deep into subconscious, uncontrolled areas. But of course, sending me into this underworld, one could say, because those kids, they live on the street, in the garbage. There were scenes where cockroaches would appear out of my dress, and just being confronted with this phase of the world, which I never have seen before. And of course, I wouldn't see if I just went there as a tourist. What happened was that suddenly it became something very personal about my identity as a European, German privileged actress, confronted with this very, very poor underworld full of amputees and midgets and drug addicts and blind and drunk and orphans and homeless people. And maybe that's also too easy to say it like this, but I thought it's interesting to put this European myth carried by a European actress into this reality and into to confront myself with my identity, or to, yes.
That whole discussion, I think, is really fascinating because, like, of course, the idea of what is a myth might also be predetermined, and we might understand a myth as something given, while it maybe only refers to a pool of stories with which we were socialized, right? So I think it's also connected, Matías, to your, I'm also curious, of course, to hear about your choice to adapt Shakespeare in an Argentinian context. It's not an obvious choice, but you have your reasons, I guess, and maybe you can let us know about that choice. And also, Lois, like, how do you see it, and how did that influence your collaboration?
So my approach to Shakespeare has to do with two things. One is the people that you see in front of the movies, the theater actors that of a circuit that works with text in a different way, and that I was attracted to their work. And second, the possibility of reading new translations of the plays made by Latin American writers, like an editorial house put together like 15, 20 years ago, a new series of translations that didn't have any footnotes, and they were made by contemporary Latin American writers. And that produced in me like an interest and a joy and a wickedness that for me was very interesting. The idea of having like a Caribbean poet translating the fruits of the forest of Arden into guavas, no, and bachas, that would be like different from what I would do even in the Rio de la Plata. I like this idea of like having access to Shakespeare, not through the Spanish from Spain, but one that can be closer to me, but not fully close, because someone from Costa Rica would translate things differently, you know, like more clearly differently than someone from Uruguay, for instance, or someone from Chile in regard to my perspective. No, and then of course we can have like differences in translation even around in the same corner, you know, but I don't know, there was something about that sort of a profanation of the text that I enjoyed, no, and that's somehow something attractive to me. That I find something attractive in translation. The operation of to translate it liberates certain elements that for me are stimulating to put in motion and put a camera and a mic in front of that.
Yeah, and the thing of the two languages, the Spanish and Portuguese, Spanish from Argentina and Portuguese, no, and in the future film we will add Spanish from Galicia, well, Galician, no, that we have a different language that is a mix between Portuguese and Spanish, no, and as they are very close, we always thought about they will speak in their own language, the characters, the people, and they will understand each other without any problem. That is what happened between Spanish and Portuguese. No, there is just a few words that we don't understand, that we, with the context, do understand it almost everything. No, and that was something that we knew. No, and Matías reflected a lot about this idea of the translation and which details change, no, the same word, as Matías were saying, no, the same word, exactly the same word translated to a different context and language has a different meaning, no, and that was very, very interesting also. And I was thinking, I found very interesting the idea of the myth as something fragmented and with a lot of voids, and how a play as The Tempest, that starting has become as a myth, but that has everything, how it works and how we work with that. No? And what we do is to fragment the text, no? And we take, okay, this idea, this other idea, this other idea, no? So even if the play is full, you have everything that the original text is full. What we did is to fragment it, no, and take just, okay, now SYCORAX, these two phrases of the text, these two other here, and we change the position, and we change the context, and something appear in this mix of fiction or myth and reality, no, and this is why we like, one of the scenes that we like the most in our work is the scene of the square, no, where we are imagining the characters with the people, no, because of this, how from this friction what emerged.
And also to continue like something with the text, and I was thinking just now listening, there is something about text and words that produce like a rhythm, and I'm attracted to that. And collaborating with Lois also exposed to me to a different sort of rhythm, no, like to say it fast, no, the possibility of like slowing down, no, in the comedy that has like, if we think about like the American comedies from the 30s and how words are playing and how these are like balls that are juggling, and that there needs to be like a certain speed in order to keep themselves in the air. Or even I once read like a quote from Robert Schumann that says that a piano piece has to be played as fast as possible. No, that is best that if it's played faster. No, and I really like that. Or it's a little bit unreasonable, but there was something in me that I was attracted to that, and coming to work with Lois was thinking otherwise, thinking differently, and thinking how this text could have another rhythm. How can we discover another side to this text that at first I would take it one way, but then it could be taken this other way, and try that different movement. I don't know, there's something in cinema that I'm attracted that has to do with rhythm and movement and words. So working around that was for me interesting, even though it seems a little bit abstract, but it's not, it's very concrete also.
We have more questions. Two more.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would like to go back to Lilith, about her work in the film. I was watching the film and was thinking about a Brazilian actress called Helena Inês. She had a book published about her in France several years ago, and it's called Helena Inês, Experimental Actress. And I was finding various connections between your work and her work. She's from the 60s and she's still alive, but the most part of her most experimental work is from the early 70s. And what she does in those films from Rogério Sganzella and Giulio Bressani is she creates kind of a magnetic field in front of the camera, and the directors explore this magnetic field with all the things that are around, people that are around her, places, the real places where she's acting. And I guess it relates with Marina's question, because somehow the camera is obsessed with you in this film, and you're in a state of somehow a kind of possession, a state of a body state that you're completely in the film, and with such a force, and it creates a kind of contrast with everything that's around, like when you're with the kids or in the market, or when you are in places that are more populated in the film. And these, I don't know, but it reminded me a lot of Elena's work, because this is a way of getting acting to be a sort of a political force as well, because your presence in those spaces creates something for the film that wouldn't be created if there was not this kind of improvisation, this kind of throwing you in some way. The film is kind of throwing you in these places, and I mean, it's very strong for me to see that, like this magnetic field created by your acting, and what it creates with the contrast with the other people that are not in the same mood. And in the same shot, we can experience different moods between different kinds of acting. And it's really a particular thing that I guess that's in the film. And perhaps you could comment a little bit, because when we watched it in the selection process of the film, we were discussing that it's somehow you're a kind of co-author of the film, because you're in the film all the time, and it's like this is not a film by Cavan. He writes that, and perhaps it's a film by Lilith as well, because it's like so important your presence in the film, as Elena's presence in the films by Rogério Sganzella and Júlio Bressani was, and she's being recognized for that like 50 years later. But well, maybe you could comment a little bit in how you created this state of mind, and how the state of this body state in I'm getting too long, sorry, but perhaps your process a little bit more, comment a little bit more on your process in the film.
Thank you so much. So lovely words. I wished I had a camera, and I did film it, and I could always re-listening to it. No, such a long question, so I don't know how to answer. I would say I don't see myself as a co-author or co-writer. I think it's a very, very Cavan-like film, but Cavan, what I learned from him is he has a certain philosophy of randomness. He always looks for the accident. So he's not someone who has a concept and who puts people into it, and he never tells you what to do, for instance. I called him after a certain point the whatever director, because each time I would ask him something, what's the scene about? What can I do? He would always go, you do whatever. Okay, but where should I go? You go wherever. And until a certain point, I felt very desperate. It was a desperate, tough kind of process. But after a while, I realized, no, it's very, very important what he actually dedicates to you or gives to you, because he makes myself so responsible. So there is nobody who tells you how to live or how to feel or what to do. You have to do it yourself. And I think that's very interesting for an actress, because I grew up in theater and I was used to a very special director who would always like tell me everything, louder, lighter, left, right, up, down, whatever. And I was like a soldier. And I kind of, I think in the last 2 years, I kind of learned that it's me and my brain who is the most interesting, and my thoughts and my emotions. And of course, it's always the combination and the temperature which comes between two people, a director and an actor. But yeah, yeah.
But maybe that's a methodology also to that you can really get into a randomness and improvisation and all kinds of accidental and contingent events if there is a presence of one person all the time. If there's someone present, very present all the time, then everything else is liberated, and you still have continuity. You can do all these kind of crazy things that he does, and employ all these different film formats, all these ways of coloring and painting and 360-degree cameras and all these things, because there is a continuity through your presence. So and he's not the only person who has done this in the history of cinema. It's a good way to, or it's a well proven methodology in being very free, at the same time have a strong continuity. You know? which people always want.
I think in the program tonight we had several forces which might be, I don't know if you agree, considered oppositional to what a myth is, like the definition of a particular narrative, nature, which is beyond control. We see in SYCORAX, we see all these trees which evolve, and the forest, and then we see Khan, who is his own force of nature, maybe using several camera formats, improvising with you. So maybe as a closing question, would you say that there's an opposite to the myth? Is chaos the opposite to the myth? And is this something, I'm fine, thank you. Or is this something you are fascinated with or through?
Is chaos an opposite to the myth?
No. I think actually creation and destruction always goes together. So often in a form of destruction and chaos, you find a certain truth or a certain beauty or a certain clearness. So that always goes together. And for Orpheus, it's the same. Destiny or her beloved dies, and now she cannot accept that, and she goes into hell and experience, and her whole journey into hell is also like a odyssey of detours, but also a search of self-questioning. And in the end, I feel she kind of comes closer to herself and her being as a singer or whatever.
I think myth is not a content. Myth is a way of saying things, and normally not a good way of saying things. It's a way of hiding things, and it's a way of mystifying things and escape. I mean, the opposite of myth is genealogy and explanation and yeah, how do you call it in what psychoanalysis does, no? What's the English word? Anyway, yeah, genealogy, reconstruction, that would be the opposite of myth. And but on the other hand, we have to deal with myth. They are there. That leaves us with the necessity to somehow deal with them. But we would be better off if they would not exist, I think.
There's one question here.
There's another question. Yeah.
Yeah. First, I'll say thank you for creating and sharing your work with us and the world. In my mind, mythology is in fact timeless and sacred, and any modern rendition to revisit the tales of mythology is a reflection of human truth. I loved both of the films. Love is a Dog from Hell as well as SYCORAX. And I myself am a historical fantasy author. So when I was watching the films, I was focused more on the themes and the prose. In Love is a Dog from Hell, I was very attracted to what felt like the midpoint of the film, where the viewer was brought into a mirror of truth, though not in fact brought in, there were glasses involved. And so my question is just to have a comment from the actor here on stage, the actress here on stage, thank you so much for being here, or the directors, on what you intended this moment and mirror of truth to mean to the viewer, and the glasses and the devil appearing at that climax moment.
There you go.
You talk about the scene with the glasses.
You're descending from a stairway, and there's a man who's saying a lot of profanity. and he has this mirror of truth and gives you a pair of glasses, and then the devil appears.
The scene is actually that he gives her that pair of glasses, and for the moment she wears those glasses, she can see Euridice. And the minute she loses the glasses, he is gone. And what I think is interesting, what I actually saw for the first time when I realized for the first time when I saw the film for the first time, is that what's very poetical to me is that she is looking for him the whole time, like the whole movie, she's searching for Euridice, not realizing that he is following her. This is something I didn't realize while we were shooting. I just saw it on screen. And I think it's just one creature of hell who gives her that magical glasses, and suddenly she sees Euridice in one of his forms, and then he already disappeared.
But there's also this joke that when you're wearing these glasses, the what we see looks like a 3D movie looks like when you're not wearing the 3D glasses, which is one of the biggest jokes in the movie, and definitely not mythological.
Lois, Matías, any closing comment from your side? We can't take you to the bar. It's very sad.
Yeah.
Yes. We go to the bed directly.
I'm going to have a beer, but here I'll be thinking of you. I never, no, I'm thinking, and I got stimulated by the idea of myth. I was not approaching the text as a myth, even though it's true that there is these topics extracted, no, from the Tempest. For me, yeah, I'm curious about this reading from other sides, reading like crookedly. I may be repeating myself, but it has to do with this idea of enlarging the possibilities. I don't know. It's silly to try to make like a full point out of it. It might be more interesting to think what things are we thinking, no, for the next step, and how we'll keep on, like what are the learnings, no, making a movie in order to learn how to or to envision how we make a movie. So I don't know. I'll keep on thinking about the idea of myth in regard to the mythology that is created of the Tempest, and try to keep on inverting it, no, keep on breaking it, keep on like focusing on only one side, or keeping like reimagining it so as to, I don't know, to get exposed to something, to some experiences. I think that that SYCORAX is for us like a map of different territories that we could go, no, from here on. And that's why I think that the film is quite eclectic in that sense, because we're trying a little bit of everything in that sense. And I guess that it's from watching at this movie as if we're like in a ship and seeing like a little light that might be like a lighthouse, and I consider SYCORAX to be that lighthouse that somehow will help us to sail, no. And so I keep on coming back in our meetings with Lois to think of Ariel, and looking at SYCORAX to try to find some answers, no, in regard to how to deal with these topics, how to deal with these myths that the play is somehow putting forward. The relationship with the people there, the relationship with the text, the relationship with the body of women, the body of like a spirit. What does it mean to make a movie about a spirit, the spirit of the air, the spirit of the island? No, it's interesting to know. It's I've been saying for a long time, I'm making movies about the female roles in Shakespeare's comedies. I won't be able to say that anymore after Ariel. No, so we're messing with my speech, no, with my little discourse that I have for 10 years. So that keep on that question on. I don't know, just that. I'm thinking about our meeting tomorrow with Lois to talk about area.
Yes. Yeah, because we, as Matías is in New York and I'm in Madrid, our methodology is to every Friday, 10 o'clock in New York, 4 p.m. in Madrid, we have a meeting and we discuss. We have this kind of work. Yeah, we have the Tempest, and we analyze the Tempest in many different ways. We have the Azores Island, no, in the other side, and our heads and our sensibility in the middle, no, and we start to put one to the other place. But it was I think very interesting how you put together our films and how you put the theme of the myth as a central point. And I think probably tomorrow we will speak about this conversation and somehow it will affect to other work and our approach to the play. And so yeah, I think thank you for this meeting, because otherwise we will do the same Q&A as you used to do, no? that we did several times already, no? So it's a way of trying to focus our work and the reality and cinema from another perspective. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you all for this collective misunderstanding tonight. It was good fun. Thank you, Lilith Stangenberg. Thank you, Diederichsen. Thank you, Lois Patiño and Matías Piñeiro. Have a good night.